Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world before your alarm clock ever screamed at you. You're walking barefoot across a dew-soaked savanna. There are no minutes here, no countdowns, just the warm pulse of sunrise and the chirp of birds that somehow always know what time it is without ever checking their phones. You squint at the horizon, watching a red sun lift itself over tall grasses. This is your morning bell. When it dips again, painting the sky tangerine and gold, that's your bedtime. The stars that follow. They're not just pretty, they're maps, schedules, and maybe even gods. In this version of time, your body tells you what to do. When you're tired, you sleep. When you're hungry, you eat. And when winter rolls in, you follow the herds or the warmth. Time is natural felt through your skin, not read from a screen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're now seated in a cave, firelight flickering across the wall. Someone's grinding pigments for paint. Someone else is dozing in a pile of furs. There's no clock in sight, just the steady rhythm of breath and crackling wood. Before humans invented calendars, we lived by the rhythms of nature. The moon waxed and waned, and we noticed. We saw the tides pull and push. Our ancestors didn't need watches, they had instincts honed over generations. But survival depended on watching the sky. You might look up and notice Orion rising just after sunset that tells you winter is coming. You learn to track seasons by star positions. And if you're in ancient Egypt, the sudden appearance of Sirius before sunrise tells you the Nile is about to flood. Time here is celestial. And you, well, you probably wouldn't survive this. Imagine having no schedule, no deadlines, no meetings. Sounds relaxing, right? Until you miss a migration or the food spoils because you didn't notice the season shift. Ancient timekeeping was as much about life and death as it was about marking birthdays, which, by the way, weren't celebrated much. Try remembering yours without a calendar. Eventually, you and your tribe settle. Farming begins. And suddenly knowing when things will happen becomes crucial. When to plant, when to harvest, when the rains might come or not. You carve lines in bone, make notches in wood. These are among humanity's earliest attempts to mark time. One of the oldest is a little thing called the Ishango bone, a 20,000-year-old chunk of baboon fibula with strange notches carved down its length. Some say it's a lunar calendar. Others think it's just someone keeping tally of something else. Scientists still debate its purpose. And what about sleep? Oh, you're not tucked in for a solid 8. No, you're dozing in 2-3 shifts whenever the fire's warm or the wolves aren't too close. Some even believe early humans slept in 2 phases: a first sleep after sundown, followed by a wakeful period in the middle of the night, and then a second sleep until morning. In that eerie midnight gap, people would think, pray or chat, a kind of dreamy twilight hour between the days. Creepy or deeply human. Out here you can't separate time from nature. They're the same thing. Time is light. Time is cold. Time is the smell of wet dirt before rain. And it's different depending on where you live. If you're in the Arctic, the sun might not rise for weeks. If you're on the equator, it rises and sets like clockwork every single day. But even with all this, early humans weren't counting minutes. That idea dividing days into tiny equal slices hadn't arrived yet. You lived in flowing moments, not ticking units. Still, you kept track. in your own way. You noticed patterns. You passed stories to explain why the moon changed shape or why night came sooner in autumn. Over time, no pun intended, you started naming these cycles, giving identity to the unseeable. And that was the first whisper of what we'd one day call time. The first bedtime story, after all, wasn't a fairy tale. It was the stars. And maybe, just maybe, someone whispering to you, when that bright one moves over there, it's time to go. You lie flat on a sun-baked stone, squinting at the long shadow of a stick poking from the ground. It's not just a stick, it's your town's newest high-tech timekeeping device. Welcome to the age of sundials, where the sun becomes your nosy supervisor, telling everyone exactly how long you've been loafing. The concept is simple. Sun rises, shadow moves. But humans, we love precision, or at least the illusion of it. So we mark the hours, draw little lines, and pretend the shadow obeys our sense of order. Which it doesn't really. The sun cheats. It wobbles slightly through the year, making shadows longer or shorter than expected. But hey, it was good enough for the ancient Egyptians, and it's still kind of cool. You stroll through Thebes around 1500 BCE, watching priests use obelisks, not just as monuments, but also as monumental clocks. When the sun casts a line along the base, it tells them when to pray, when to eat, when to sacrifice a goose, or whatever was on the divine schedule. These weren't just timepieces, they were spiritual calendars carved in stone. It wasn't long before portable sundials showed up. Small ones you could carry. Romans had them, and some were so small you'd lose them in your tunic if you weren't careful. Imagine checking your wrist, not for a smartwatch, but a tiny plate with lines and a stylus, trying to read the hour in Latin while squinting into the blinding sun. But sundials had one fatal flaw. They needed sunlight. Nighttime, cloudy day. You were on your own. Which brings us to an important reality check. You, with your glowing digital everything, probably wouldn't last 2 foggy mornings in 300 BCE. Time would vanish like mist, and so would your entire sense of direction. Even when sundials worked, they weren't global. Different regions made different ones. Some faced south, others north. Some had 12 hours, some more. You'd think an hour is an hour, but back then, an hour changed with the seasons. Winter hours were short, summer hours much longer. I'll meet you at the third hour meant something totally different in June than in December. And that's when it hits you. Time isn't universal, it's local, tribal, cultural, even emotional. And sundials, for all their elegance, expose that uncomfortable truth. Time wasn't in control of humans. Humans were trying desperately to control time. Scientists still debate when sundials went from being religious instruments to secular scheduling tools. At what point did humans stop looking at shadows to honor gods and start looking at them to show up on time for bread? Meanwhile, you pick up a fun fact that sticks like gum in your brain. The word hour comes from the ancient Greek hora, which originally meant season or time of year. That's right before hours were minutes, they were moods. You didn't ask, what time is it? You asked, what kind of time is this? And speaking of moods, sundials were surprisingly sassy. Some had inscriptions like, I count only the sunny hours, or I mark the time, do you sundials through shade, quite literally. There's your first dad joke of the night, 2 more to go. So here you are, lounging in the Mediterranean sun, trying to decide whether the shadow means it's time for lunch or just time to complain about the heat. And behind you, cities begin to rise. Public life expands. Markets bustle. People start arriving late. And late, dear listener, is dangerous. Miss the gate closing. You're sleeping outside the walls. Miss a meeting with a merchant. That's your trade route gone. Sundials weren't just decorative, they became serious tools for social survival. Eventually you'll need something better, something you can trust on a cloudy day. But before we get to water clocks and their delightful dribbles, let's pause here. You're lying on warm stone, watching the shadow stretch slowly across your toes. And for now, it feels like enough. You're standing in a dim stone room that smells faintly of wet clay and roasted goat. In the center, a bowl drips steadily into a basin. Plink, plink, plink. You don't need to count, someone else already did. You're staring at a water clock, or clepsydra, and it's quietly blowing your prehistoric mind. Sundials were great if you were outdoors and fond of sunlight. But humans, we're stubborn. We want time inside, at night, when it's raining, during boring political debates that need a timer. So we invented time that flows literally. It starts simple. A bowl with a hole in the bottom. Water drips out slowly. When the bowl empties, time's up. Then comes the inverse, water flows in, and as the level rises, you watch marks on the inside walls, each notch another measure of the day. The Greeks, the Chinese, even the Persians, everyone got in on it. And like any good invention, things escalated fast. You're in ancient Athens now, watching a philosopher on trial. A water clock ticks in the corner. He's got until the water runs out to make his case. No pressure. These clocks weren't just for time, they were justice in liquid form. And courtroom drama had never been so drippy. But the Greeks didn't stop there. They added bells, gears, even little floating figurines that popped up to announce the hours. One Alexandrian engineer even rigged a water-powered bird that chirped. You're impressed and a little annoyed. Because even back then, people were already turning clocks into entertainment. Then you fast forwards to ancient China, where entire multi-story towers ran on hydraulic timekeeping. Giant bronze urns, clever siphons turning wheels. It's like a Rube Goldberg machine met a tea ceremony. Oh, and some of these clocks didn't use water. They used wine. Yes, wine. A slightly more enjoyable way to measure your last 2 hours on Earth. Scientists still debate whether these ancient hydraulic contraptions were truly accurate or just impressively complicated. Some say they were more status symbols than science, less about timekeeping, more about bragging rights. Regardless, they changed the game. Time could now be contained, controlled. It wasn't just about shadows on stone anymore. Now you had something you could bring indoors. Use at night. Use in secret. Use for rituals, astronomy, or theatre. Time started to seep into every part of society. And like all things human, we got weird with it. One obscure Babylonian temple had a water clock that not only measured the hours, but allegedly told the priests when gods were in the mood for sacrifices. Let that sink in. Time became divine bureaucracy. You noticed something else while watching the clock. Drip. People started organizing their entire day around it. Not just when to sleep or farm, but when to work, eat, bathe, pray. The flowing water became the background rhythm of cities. Even in private homes, wealthier families might have owned their own little clepsydra, like a fancy egg timer, to remind the kids it was bedtime or that their turn in the bath was up. By now, you're probably wondering how this all felt. Well, imagine growing up where the sound of dripping water is not just ambience, but authority. It's the voice that says, time's up. Move along. And for sleep, you're not clocking 8 hours under a duvet. No, you're snoozing in cycles still. But now you're being told when. The temple bells ring when the water clock hits a mark. That means wake up. That means evening prayers. That means don't get caught snoring, or the priest will throw holy herbs at your head, so you lie back. You listen to the steady plink, plink, plink. It's strangely soothing, like rain on a rooftop. And for a moment you feel the earliest hint of what we modern folks call a bedtime routine. But beware. Water clocks were fragile. Spill it, smash it. Time stops, quite literally. And with no phones or backup timers, your whole schedule collapses into chaos. That's right, no snooze button, just soggy consequences. Still in that echoing room of stone and silence, you realize something profound. Time isn't natural anymore. It's mechanical, it's human-made, and it's slowly becoming trusted, even if it leaks. You wake up to bells, not alarm bells, not emergency bells, just bells, deep, echoing, and perfectly spaced. They ring through the stone halls of a medieval monastery, bouncing off cold walls and sleeping heads. It's 3 a.m., and your new job, if you can call it that, is to pray. You pull your scratchy wool robe tighter around you and shuffle along behind the other monks. Time here isn't measured in hours. It's measured in offices' rituals that must be done at set intervals, day and night. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. You chant, you kneel, you recite. You wait for the next bell. This is your life. Now, one long loop of devotion, broken only by modest meals and colder sleep. The monastery, ironically, becomes the birthplace of modern scheduling. The bells don't just mark time, they create it. They carve the day into strict, repeatable chunks, not for convenience, but for spiritual discipline, to align with divine will, and to keep everyone a little too sleepy to sin. You're groggy, but you notice something strange. Time feels heavier here, more sacred. Each moment is purposeful. Each bell toll a reminder of eternity. And ironically, it's in this sacred space that something quietly revolutionary happens. Mechanical clocks. Because monks had a problem, someone always had to stay up and watch the water clock. Refill it. Watch it leak. Not ideal when your vow is silence and your sleep is already trashed. So in the 13th century, monks in northern Italy began tinkering. What if a machine could count time reliably, relentlessly, without anyone watching? The result? Gears, weights, escapements, wooden arms tapping bells at precise intervals. The earliest mechanical clocks didn't even have faces, they were all chime, no dial. But that was enough. It worked. And suddenly time wasn't just tracked, it was enforced. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive monk life. You with your 2 a.m. snack runs and refusal to go to bed before you've checked your entire phone twice. You'd last maybe 2 days before sneaking out during Vespers and getting caught by Brother Oswald while trying to nap behind the firewood pile. Scientists still debate exactly where and when the first mechanical clock was built. Some say England, others point to Italian abbeys. But one thing is clear: once the idea caught on, it spread like holy wildfire. Soon, town squares had massive clocks clanging away. Some even had automata mechanical figures that moved when the hour struck. Imagine watching wooden saints punch bells or little dragons breathing fire every noon. Time became a spectacle. But this wasn't just cool tech. It changed how people lived. Imagine a medieval town, suddenly organized not by sunlight, but by a bell tower that dictated everything: when to wake, work, trade, worship, sleep. Public clocks became symbols of civic power. The town that could own time could own people's lives.
And sleep. Forget about it. The tolling bells disrupted the old patterns of segmented slumber. In cities, people began to sleep less like animals and more like machines, cramming rest into whatever window the bells allowed. In some places, the church bell marked the cover fire, the time each night when people had to extinguish home fires and get to bed. It wasn't a bedtime suggestion. It was the law. Time became a matter of public safety. And the monks, they kept tinkering. Clocks got better. More gears, more precision, more reliability. Soon wealthy merchants and nobles wanted their own. Time became status. The bell in your hall said, "I matter." The ticking in your foyer whispered, "I control the day." It's in this world, half sacred, half mechanical, that the idea of regular time finally takes hold. Not seasonal, not flexible, not celestial, but fixed, predictable, merciless. And it starts with you, half asleep, dragging your feet down a stone corridor as the bells ring again. You whisper under your breath, "All ready," and the monk beside you nods solemnly. Always. You step out into a town square, humming with life and dust. The year is somewhere around 1400, give or take, and your neck hurts from staring up. Above you looms a tower, a stone and iron beast with a massive gear-driven clock face. It ticks, it tocks, and every hour it bellows out a gong that makes pigeons flee and bakers flinch. This, dear time traveller, is when time stops being a whisper and starts shouting orders. The mechanical clock has escaped the monastery. It's out in public now, bossing around entire cities. You, your neighbours, your workday, it's all under new management. Time no longer belongs to the sun or your stomach. It belongs to gears. And the gears don't care how tired you are.
Merchants open their stalls when the hour chimes. Apprentices start sweeping the floor at the third bell. A town crier reads proclamations on the hour every hour, regardless of whether anyone wants to listen. The town runs like clockwork because there is literally a clock doing the running. You glance up at the mechanism. It's a wonder of iron and ingenuity. No electricity, no batteries, just falling weights, pulleys, and spinning cogs. The escapement ticks away, regulating the motion so precisely that it feels almost alive. And in a way, it is. Time has become mechanical muscle, and muscle means power. Because here's the truth, clocks weren't just practical, they were political. The town that owned the biggest, loudest clock tower declared itself powerful. It told rival cities, "We're so advanced, we don't just have walls and guards, we have control over time itself." It's no accident that some of the earliest public clocks were funded by guilds, kings, or mayors. Owning time meant controlling labour trade, even law. Scientists still debate just how transformative this moment was, but most agree that once time became regularized by machines, human society started shifting in dramatic, irreversible ways.
Imagine being a craftsman before the clock. You worked from dawn to dusk, judged by sunlight. But now you work from the 5th hour to the 12th. Every tick is tracked, every slip in productivity measured. You get docked if you show up late. You get fined if you quit early. And you'd probably complain, loudly, and miss your nap. People began to obsess. Cities adjusted their rhythms. Markets ran smoother. But also people began to rush,
to worry, to race. Time, once a fluid friend, became a tyrant. A bossy, clanging metal dictator in the sky.
And sleep. It takes a hit. Cities stay up later, cramming more into the workday. Rest is no longer when you're tired, it's when the bell lets you.
You sneak off to a side street where someone is building a smaller clock. Something for a home, maybe a church library. It's got fewer bells, more delicate gears. A local artisan is hand-painting the numerals. You ask if it's accurate. The man shrugs. Close enough to be dangerous, he says, and smiles.
And that's when it clicks for you. For the first time, time is enforceable. You can prove someone was late. You can schedule meetings to the hour. You can build routines not around mood or moonlight, but around a gear.
The age of vague approximations is ending. The age of punctuality is beginning. And it won't be kind. Before you leave, you hear a phrase that will echo for centuries: tempus fugit. Time flies. And now, for the first time, humans feel it. Really feel it. You're no longer drifting through sunrises and seasons. You're being marched forward, second by second.
You try to sleep, but it's hard. The clock tower gongs again. It's 3:00 a.m. You're awake. Not because your body wants to be, but because some machine said so. Welcome to the mechanical age of time. You're sitting on a bench at a train station, fidgeting. The year is 1880-something. The bench is hard, your tea has gone cold, and according to the clock on the wall, your train should have left 5 minutes ago. But wait, look at the conductor's watch. He says it's not 5 minutes late, because his clock runs on railway time. Yours. It's still set to local time. And therein lies the problem.
Welcome to the age when time stopped being personal and became synchronized. You are now living in the era where trains, not priests, dictate the clock. And they are absolutely not waiting for your village's sunset.
Before trains, every town kept its own time based on the position of the sun. Noon was when the sun was directly overhead. But here's the catch: noon in London wasn't the same as noon in Bristol or Birmingham or even the next town over. In a world that moved at the speed of horses, this didn't matter. But trains. Trains changed everything.
You climb aboard a steam-belching monster, its pistons pumping like angry lungs. This thing crosses counties in hours, not days. Suddenly it matters a lot if your town says it's 2:03 and the one down the track says 2:17. Miss a connection by 15 minutes and you're stranded in Swindon eating cold meat pies and grumbling at pigeons.
So railway companies across Europe and North America made a decision. We're picking one time, a standard, for the entire line, no exceptions. In Britain it became known as railway time, and eventually it replaced local time entirely. Clocks in public places were reset. Towns grumbled, farmers complained, but the trains didn't care, and neither did business. Because once you could rely on exact schedules, a whole new world opened up. Appointments could be precise. Mail could be faster. Factories could synchronize labor shifts. Money and people could move like clockwork. Scientists still debate whether this shift to standard time was inevitable or just an aggressive flex by industrialists. Either way, it happened fast. And by the late 1800s, the final boss of time coordination emerged: the time zone. You now leap to Washington, D.C., 1884. Delegates from around the world gather at the International Meridian Conference. The goal? To slice the Earth into 24 vertical wedges, each 1 hour apart. They argue. They draw lines. Some countries refuse to play along. France throws shade and keeps Paris time for decades. But eventually, the Greenwich Meridian wins. England becomes the planet's time referee. You look at a world map with these new zones painted in. It's a patchwork, a compromise, and yet this patchwork becomes law. Now, every clock in New York says the same as every other New York clock. And every train conductor, every school bell, every whistle in a factory aligns with it. For the first time in human history, time is global. Not in your bones, not in your sky, but on a printed schedule.
And it's not just trains, telegraphs helped push it along too. Imagine sending a message across the country in seconds, only to have no idea when it arrived because both ends are using different clocks. The horror. You might as well have sent a bottle down a river. This shift changes everything. Time becomes less about where you are and more about who you belong to. Which zone, which system, which rhythm of commerce and communication,
And sleep. Oh, don't even think about slipping off for a mid-morning nap. You're on a schedule now. Everyone is. Your boss, your school teacher, your barber. Everyone answers to the same invisible master. The standardized tick of time zones. You probably wouldn't survive this either. Your body's still used to gentle sunrises and food when you're hungry, now has to jolt awake at 7 a.m. Sharp, even if it's pitch black in winter. It's not natural, it's not healthy, but it is efficient.
and the best part. The clocks don't care. You lean back on that bench again. The station clock ticks. Your train finally arrives on time according to Greenwich. And somewhere deep down, a piece of you misses the days when a rooster was enough. You're strutting through a foggy Victorian street now, boots clicking against cobblestone. And guess what's jingling in your pocket? No, not coins. Not a monocle. It's something far more powerful, your very own pocket watch. Welcome to the era where time doesn't just tower above you on bell towers or train stations. It now travels with you. Held close, glanced at, fretted over. For the first time, timekeeping is portable and personal.
You take out your watch. It's heavy ornate, maybe even gold-plated if you're flashy. You flip it open with a snap, pretending to check the time while secretly admiring your reflection in the polished inner lid. Everyone does it. Victorian self-timer selfies.
But this isn't just a fashion flex. It's a shift in psychology. Time is no longer public property, it's yours. You own your minutes, you control your appointments. You show up for tea exactly at 4 hours, and if you're late, it's because you know you're late. And you'll apologise profusely with style.
Of course, the pocket watch isn't just for the dapper gentleman. Industrial workers start using them to time breaks.
Doctors use them to monitor pulses. Military officers coordinate manoeuvres to the minute. And lovers, oh yes, lovers use them to measure those heart-pounding seconds between secret glances and planned encounters. Meet me at 1:30 beneath the gaslight by the bakery, she whispers. And your watch becomes a conspirator. Scientists still debate how much these little devices affected human anxiety. Because let's face it now that you can track time down to the minute you do. And once you can measure lateness, guilt isn't far behind. Still, there's something charming about it. You imagine a society where time is respected, not feared. Where a lady checks her delicate silver fob watch before a carriage ride. Where a shopkeeper opens his doors exactly at 9 because the clock in his waistcoat tells him so.
But you also start to feel the pressure creeping in. Punctuality becomes a virtue. Tardiness. A character flaw. Whole moral judgments attach themselves to whether you arrive fashionably late or disgracefully delayed. Even literature of the time treats clocks as metaphors for good breeding and responsibility. If your watch runs fast, maybe you do too. You step into a tiny repair shop and watch an old horologist work on a gear no bigger than your fingernail. His eyes squint through thick lenses. His hands don't shake. This man is more surgeon than craftsman, and his job is sacred to keep you on time. And oh, the drama when things go wrong. A lost pocket watch could ruin a marriage proposal. A cracked crystal might delay an entire board meeting. There's even a documented case of a duel being scheduled because one gentleman claimed the other arrived 10 minutes too late for honour. But let's not ignore the comedy of it all. There's a particularly quirky case from 1890s America where a preacher held 2 sermons simultaneously in 2 towns made possible by using 2 watches set to different rail times. He'd give one sermon hop the train and arrive just in time for the second, as if divinely transported. Time travel by timetable. You take one last look at your timepiece. The second hand ticks smoothly, tick, tick, tick. Every tick a tiny heartbeat of modern life. A signal that the world has changed, because now time is no longer based on seasons or shadows. It fits in your pocket. It ticks on your wrist. And soon it'll be glowing on your phone. But let's not rush ahead. Instead, you find a park bench. You sit. You open your watch and let it dangle. The chain gleams in the low sun. You try not to count the seconds. But you do, because now you can't help it. Time belongs to you now. Or maybe, just maybe, you belong to it. You're riding across the American plains in a rattling train car, nose smudged against the window, watching the sun blaze low on the horizon. Your internal sense of time says it's almost dinner. But your watch, it says otherwise. In fact, it says something wildly different depending on which zone you're in. And for the first time, you're starting to feel the gap between solar truth and standard fiction. See, the sun doesn't care about borders. It rises when it wants to, sets when it wants to. And yet here you are, zipping across lines drawn on a map, obediently shifting your entire reality forward or back by exactly 1 hour. It's unsettling. Like the planets playing a prank on you with invisible time walls. Before time zones, you might have relied on sundials, town criers, or even the church bell. But now you're caught in the gears of a coordinated machine. And let's be clear, solar time, the real ancient kind, has officially lost the fight. You're now living in standard time, and it doesn't care where the sun is in the sky. You look down at your watch, still ticking, still obedient, but you feel a weird disconnect. In some towns, noon means the sun is already tilting west. In others, it hasn't peaked yet, and yet they both call it 12 o'clock. It's a polite fiction, social jet lag disguised as structure. Scientists still debate whether time zones should follow natural geography more closely, or if they're simply too entrenched to fix. Some regions bend the rules completely. China, for example, despite spanning 5 zones, operates on just one Beijing time. You could be in Xinjiang, where the sun doesn't rise until 10 a.m., but you're still expected to punch in for work at 900. That's not timekeeping, that's time gaslighting. And then there's India, which decided to split the difference and run on UTC till 5:30. Because why follow the herd when you can have half a time zone all to yourself? You stroll into a train station cafe and overhear someone arguing over whether a package is late. Late by whose time, they ask. That's the question, isn't it? Is time local? Is it imperial? Is it universal? At what point does on time mean on someone else's time, and now something inside you starts to itch? Not physically, existentially, because even though time is more precise than ever, it feels less honest. You remember the sun on your face days from earlier, the moonlit pauses, the belly-driven bedtimes. All gone now, replaced with schedules, broadcasts, and syncopated alarms. And your sleep. Let's just say your body is not thrilled. Especially if you've crossed 2 time zones today and your brain is somewhere over Nebraska. Jet lag, after all, is your circadian rhythm calling customer support and getting put on hold.
Sleep scientists have tried to make peace with this artificial structure. But studies show something strange. We don't actually sleep better with standardized time. We just sleep faster, tighter, less. Schools in early start zones have higher dropout rates. Night owls are punished by 9 to 5 clocks. Teenagers everywhere beg to sleep in, and society responds with a 6:45 bus schedule.
You probably wouldn't survive this with your sanity fully intact. Let's be honest, half of us are walking around as if haunted by missed alarms and late meetings. But it's the world we built, and now we're stuck in it.
Still, every once in a while, a whisper of rebellion shows up. Farmers who rise by the rooster, artists who sleep by moonlight, entire subcultures that reject standard time living, instead by the sun, the soil, or their own stubborn hearts.
You leave the cafe and climb a hill as the sun sets over the plains. According to the official clock in your pocket, it's exactly 7:42 p.m. But your body knows better. The sky is turning orange. The air cools. Somewhere a cricket chirps. And you know, really know, it's time to wind down, even if the schedule says otherwise. You wake up groggy. It's still dark outside, but your clock says it's 7:00 a.m. Something's wrong. Something's off. Your body is confused and your brain feels like it's been spun in a bingo tumbler. And then it hits you. Daylight saving time.
You, dear listener, are trapped in one of humanity's most head-scratching experiments. The idea that we can save daylight by pretending the hour hand just moves, with zero consequences, except for all the consequences.
Let's rewind. It starts innocently enough. Some 18th century thinkers toyed with the idea of shifting time seasonally to make better use of daylight. Ben Franklin famously joked that people could save candles by waking earlier. But the real kicker came in the 20th century during wartime. In 1916, Germany adopted daylight saving time DST to conserve fuel, and the rest of the world slowly followed like confused cousins at a family reunion. Now you find yourself springing forward in March and falling back in November. Except when you don't, because not all regions observe it. Some states opt out. Some countries never opted in. Arizona, for instance, said no thanks and just kept sweating through the desert on its own clock. The result: total chaos. Missed meetings, sleepy commutes, cranky toddlers, confused microwaves. The day after the spring change, heart attack rates spike. Car accidents go up. Your sleep crushed like a soda can under a boot. Scientists still debate whether DST actually saves any energy. Studies are all over the place. Some say it helps, others say the opposite. What they do agree on is this: messing with your circadian rhythm twice a year is like giving your brain jet lag and then asking it to drive a forklift. And you probably wouldn't survive DST week without complaining. You'd walk around muttering, "It's not really 700," while clutching your coffee like a life raft. And we don't blame you. But despite the backlash, daylight saving refuses to die. Every year there are debates. Some want to keep it forever. Some want to scrap it entirely. Others say, can't we just split the difference and move 30 minutes and stay there forever? But time, it seems, has become political theatre. You wander into a small town hardware store just after the clocks change, and the cashier looks as confused as you feel. Did we lose an hour
Or gain one? She asks, staring blankly at the wall clock that's blinking 12 zebras like a taunting robot.
You shrug. At this point, who even knows? The weirdest part, daylight saving isn't even based on daylight anymore. In cities with electric lights and 24-hour gyms, the sun is mostly ignored. And yet we're still moving the clocks. As if shifting time on a Sunday will magically make the Earth tilt differently. But here's a quirky tidbit. During the 2007 US extension of DST, the candy industry lobbied for Halloween to fall within daylight saving, so kids could trick or treat with more light. That's right, chocolate dictated federal time policy. Nothing says modern civilization quite like that. Still, there's something almost poetic about the whole thing. Twice a year, the nation agrees to pretend it's a different time, as if consensus could bend reality. We all play along, fumbling with microwave settings and oven clocks, trying to remember if we should spring forward or just spring for more coffee. And sleep. Let's not kid ourselves. The spring change is brutal. Your body clock needs days, weeks to adjust. You might find yourself eating dinner when your stomach says lunch, waking up before sunrise like a confused chicken, wondering if it's actually bedtime or just emotionally bedtime. But then fall arrives, and you gain an hour. Oh, that sweet extra hour. People treat it like winning the lottery. Don't forget they say smug and delighted we get an extra hour of sleep, as if you'll actually use it to sleep and not scroll through videos of raccoons playing xylophones. Still, even with the drama, there's a comfort in the ritual. A twice-yearly communal time warp, a shared groan, a nationwide reset button, however dysfunctional. You step outside as the sun rises just a little too early. The world feels crooked. The clocks say one thing, your bones say another. And in that moment, you remember something crucial. Time may be an invention. But sleep is still real. And right now, you'd give anything to steal that hour back. You wake up feeling unrested. Again. You didn't stay up late. You didn't drink coffee after dinner. But something's not right. It's like your body's operating in a different time zone than your alarm clock. That's because it is. Welcome to the eternal tug-of-war between your circadian rhythms and the artificial tyrant known as the wall clock. You stretch, you blink, but your brain isn't ready. That's because it's still pumping melatonin, the chemical that tells your body it's nighttime, even though your bedside clock insists it's 7:30 a.m. sharp and your spreadsheet won't update itself. Inside you, a biological orchestra is playing on its own schedule. Your temperature rises and falls. Hormones surge. Cells repair themselves at midnight and get sluggish by noon. The thing is, your body doesn't know what a clock is. It knows sunrise. It knows darkness. It knows the slow, ancient rhythm of the earth turning beneath the stars. And you live in a world that says get up at 6:45, be productive by 9, eat lunch at 12, wind down by 10, repeat. But the rhythms inside you don't always agree. Scientists call this mismatch social jet lag, that foggy, out-of-sync feeling when your internal clock drifts out of step with the socially imposed one. Studies show it affects everything: memory, mood, metabolism, even immunity. Night owls forced into early schedules often show symptoms similar to chronic sleep deprivation. You shuffle into the kitchen and look at the toaster, which insultingly always blinks the correct time. But deep inside, your mitochondria are muttering, "Too early. Go back to bed." And you're not alone. 1 in every 3 adults struggles with sleep disorders, many of which can be traced to this unnatural alignment. Industrial society created something miraculous: coordinated time. but in doing so, it quietly declared war on the human body. Let's talk about shift work. Night shifts, early shifts, rotating shifts. If you work outside, the standard 9 to 5 chances are your circadian rhythms are constantly under siege. Nurses, pilots, factory workers, they don't just fight fatigue, they fight their own biology. Increased risk of obesity, depression, cancer, it's all linked. Your body doesn't adapt, it copes. And yet, ironically, one of the most delicate clocks we've ever built isn't mechanical, it's genetic. Nearly every cell in your body contains its own tiny timekeeper, part of your biological clock system. These clocks regulate the thousands of processes synced by a master pacemaker in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That little bundle of neurons, no larger than a grain of rice, keeps you running in time with the light outside. Unless, of course, your job requires you to pretend the moon is the sun. Scientists still debate whether we can truly reset our internal clocks, or whether we're doomed to stumble through fluorescent-lit nights forever. Light therapy, melatonin supplements, even circadian reprogramming are being tested. But the truth, we're trying to heal with hacks what society broke with schedule. You might be thinking, fine, but I'll catch up on sleep on the weekend. Cute idea. Doesn't work. Studies show that trying to repay your sleep debt is like pouring water into a colander. A nap can help, sure, but it won't fix 5 days of mistimed mornings and artificial bedtimes. And here's the kicker. This conflict is new. For nearly all of human history, sleep followed the sun. People nodded off when it got dark. They woke when it got light. But today, we're flooded with artificial light. Screens, street lamps, neon signs blinking open, 24 hours. Even though you're clearly not open internally, you step outside before dawn trying to wake up. The sky is pale. The birds are mocking you with their cheerful songs. And somewhere, deep in your bones, your ancient biology sighs and says, "We weren't made for this." So you yawn. You push forward. You obey the clock, even as your body drags behind. And you wonder, how did time, our invention, become our enemy? You're deep underground now, in a quiet lab where the air hums with sterilized chill. Around you, scientists in white coats whisper near enormous machines that do something incredible. They measure time with atoms. No sunlight, no ticking, no gears. Just the delicate dance of electrons shifting energy levels inside cesium-133 atoms. This is the atomic clock, the most precise timekeeper humans have ever built. And you're standing right next to it, even though it's slightly terrifying. How accurate is it? Well, if you started it running at the dawn of human civilization, say when the first cave paintings were drying, it would still be less than a second off today. That's how ridiculously mind-bendingly accurate this is. You're watching time become less poetic and more clinical. No longer is it told by the sun or sung by bells. Now it's defined by a physical constant. 9, 192, 631, 770 oscillations of a cesium atom equals exactly 1 second. That's it. That's what your phone, GPS, computer and microwave all quietly depend on. And it's all a bit unsettling, isn't it? You walk through the lab as technicians calibrate devices that will help sync satellites. Your phone knows what time it is because of atomic clocks. Planes fly, stock markets, open nuclear submarines dive, all based on this near-infallible rhythm ticking invisibly around the world. And the irony, the more accurate our clocks get, the more we realize how slippery time is. Because here's the strange part.
Time is not constant. Time changes depending on where you are and how fast you're going. Einstein dropped that bomb in the early 20th century, and the world's been catching up ever since. Atomic clocks on GPS satellites tick faster than clocks on Earth by about 38 microseconds per day because they're farther from Earth's gravity. If that sounds small, it's not. Without correcting for that, your GPS location would drift by several kilometers every day. Scientists still debate whether time really changes or whether it's just our measuring sticks that bend. You pass by a second chamber where they're building an optical lattice clock, next-gen stuff that uses strontium atoms and promises to be even more precise than cesium. Like this thing might only be off by 1 second every 15 billion years precise, which is longer than the universe has existed. So, pretty punctual. But at some point, a funny question bubbles up. Why? Why do we keep chasing smaller and smaller measurements of time? Do we need to know the nanosecond something happens? Does the difference between 5 and 5 matter to your dinner plans? The answer is both yes and no. For high-frequency trading algorithms, yes. For planetary navigation, definitely yes. For catching your bus, probably not. But the more we build technology that runs on micro-scheduling, the more these tiny discrepancies do start to matter, even in ways you don't see. But here's a quirky tidbit. In 1972, the world started adding leap seconds to atomic time. Why? Because the Earth, bless her spinning soul, is imperfect. She slows down, speeds up, wobbles. So atomic time, perfect and pitiless, must occasionally pause to let the planet catch up. Yes, once in a while, the most precise clocks on Earth are told, "Hold on a sec." You chuckle. Imagine telling your microwave, "Just take a breather." Earth's doing a little dance. And sleep well, it hasn't gotten easier. In fact, as time becomes more precise, our relationship with it becomes more fragile. There's no room for drift, no forgiveness. One wrong decimal and your 40 p.m. becomes 40 a.m. and you've just texted your boss, "On my way," in the middle of the night. You pause by a clock display mounted on the wall. It doesn't tick. It flickers numbers with cold certainty. It's so precise, it no longer feels like time. It feels like data. And in that moment you remember the sundials, the bells, the drip of water echoing in stone halls. You remember when time felt alive. Now it feels engineered. You exhale. The air's still humming. The atomic clock keeps going. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't blink. And if you tried to sleep down here under its watchful, oscillating eye, you might never sleep again. You're floating now, literally. Out in orbit, just above the curve of Earth, tethered loosely to the edge of a space station. There's no ticking, no sunrise, no bedtime. Just silence. And movement. And the slow realization that time doesn't work the same up here. Welcome to the domain of relativity, where Einstein takes your nice, tidy understanding of time and tears it into spaghetti. Let's start with the easy part. Time you've always believed is a constant. It moves forward at 1 second per second. Simple, predictable, boring. But according to Einstein, it's not that simple. Time is relative. Its speed changes depending on how fast you're moving and how close you are to a strong gravitational field. So here in orbit, zooming around Earth at nearly 28,000 km/h, your clock is ticking slightly faster than clocks back on the surface. Not enough to notice with your eyes, but enough that your GPS account for it every single day. Without this correction, Your Google Maps would send you into the ocean when you're trying to get tacos. And it gets weirder. If you were to hover just outside a black hole where gravity is intense enough to twist space like a wrung-out ragtime, for you would slow dramatically. Minutes for you could be years for someone far away. The closer you get to extreme gravity, the more time stretches. Fall in, and well, we're not sure what happens. Scientists still debate whether time stops completely at the event horizon, or whether it just gets so slow that you'll never know it ended. But let's come back from that cosmic cliff. Back on Earth, atomic clocks placed at the top of a mountain tick faster than ones at sea level. Just a few thousand feet of elevation and time warps ever so slightly. It's measurable, repeatable, real. You live your whole life assuming time is universal, but physics keeps whispering, it isn't. You now realize your body, the one grumpy about daylight saving, about early alarms, is also dealing with tiny relativistic shifts all the time. Minuscule, but constant. And no, it doesn't excuse being late to work, but it does give you a decent science excuse if you're into dramatic exits. Sorry, I was traveling too fast for your primitive clock. Here's a quirky tidbit: astronauts on the International Space Station age just a bit slower than us on Earth due to these effects. Not enough to grant them time travel bragging rights, but technically, yes, they return slightly younger than when they left. A few milliseconds give or take, better than Botox. And then comes the existential itch. If time isn't fixed, if it bends and wobbles and stretches depending on where and how you move, what is time? Is it something physical, something real, or just a byproduct of how we perceive change? Physicists argue about this over sandwiches. Some think time is a fundamental dimension like space. Others believe it might emerge from deeper, more mysterious rules of quantum mechanics. Still others whisper theories of multiverses where time flows sideways backwards or loops like a Mobius strip. Meanwhile, you're just trying to sleep on a schedule that makes sense. But in orbit, good luck. Astronauts see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets every day. That's right, every 90 minutes, the sun rises again. Circadian rhythm obliterated. The body has no clue when to wind down. Sleep becomes something you enforce with eye masks, scheduled naps, and a well-timed melatonin gummy. You lie in your space bunk staring at the padded ceiling, wondering, if time stretches and squishes like dough, how do we feel it so rigidly? Why do we still cling to our little wall clocks, our dinner times, our calendars? Maybe because we need to. Maybe because without them the cosmos would feel too big, too slow, too fast, too much. Or maybe time is the story we tell ourselves to stay sane. And as Earth spins far below you, blue and cloud-draped, you glance at your wrist. No ticking, just numbers glowing on a little screen, pretending they make sense. And somehow, despite it all, you feel sleepy. You're sitting in a lab now, but it's not like the clean, humming atomic clock chamber from before. This one is stranger, smaller, quieter. A single electron pulses on a monitor. A beam splitter hovers in mid-air. And somewhere in this quiet room, time is misbehaving. Welcome to the quantum world where nothing is stable, nothing is intuitive, and time might not exist at all. You squint at the monitor. A photon appears to go two directions at once. A particle pops in and out of existence like it's skipping frames in a bad video stream. And the big question physicists keep asking is, how does time even fit into this chaos? You've spent your whole life imagining time as a river,
flowing forward always. But down here in the quantum realm, there is no river, only waves, probabilities, and in some interpretations, no time at all. According to some physicists, time is not a fundamental part of the universe. It might just be a convenient illusion that appears when lots of quantum stuff interacts. Like the illusion of a wave when you throw pebbles into a pond. It looks real, feels real, but it's just what happens when enough chaos blends into pattern. You try to process this. Try to think of time not as something that moves, but as something that emerges. That requires memory, entropy, observation. Scientists still debate whether time is built into the fabric of quantum mechanics, or whether it's a byproduct of how we as humans measure change. Some experiments suggest particles don't care about time. They exist in superposition before, during, and after, all blurred together. The famous delayed choice experiments even suggest that future measurements can influence past behavior. Wrap your brain around that before bed. And then there's loop quantum gravity, a theory where space and time are quantized, broken into tiny, indivisible chunks. Time becomes less like a flowing ribbon and more like a pixelated video. Flipbooks of reality. Nothing in between. You sit cross-legged on the lab floor now trying to make sense of a universe that might not know what before and after even mean. And you're not alone in this confusion. Einstein's relativity showed that time depends on speed and gravity. Quantum mechanics shows that particles don't obey time at all. The two models don't get along. They're the celebrity couple of physics, brilliant together, but constantly arguing. And if you try to combine them, say, when studying black holes or the Big Bang, you get equations that break down. Variables that cancel each other. Or worse, results that imply time simply disappears at the smallest scales. You look around the lab again. Nothing's moving. And yet, everything is in motion. You're used to clocks, to rhythm, to change. But here in this space there's only uncertainty. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some scientists believe time might flow backwards in parts of the universe. Others argue there are parallel timelines branching off with every quantum choice you make. Every yes and no spawning a fresh string of seconds. And in each one, you're sipping different tea. And don't get them started on the block universe theory, where past, present, and future already exist, laid out like pages in a book. In this model, the future isn't waiting. It's already there. You just haven't read that part yet. Sleep scientists can't do much with quantum time, of course. Try explaining entropic temporal decoherence to someone who's just trying to take a nap. But there are studies exploring whether perception of time could be influenced by quantum noise in the brain. We don't have the answers yet, but the questions keep getting weirder. And you're just trying to make it to bedtime without spiraling. You lie back on the lab floor and imagine a world where time is optional, where there is no past, no next, only a swirling soup of maybe. It's both terrifying and soothing. Because if time doesn't really exist, maybe the deadline doesn't either. Maybe the mistake you made last week never actually happened. Maybe the future is already okay. You close your eyes, and in the silence for just a second, everything feels still. No clocks, no ticking, just the possibility that time is a story your brain is telling itself so you can sleep. You're walking now, not through a lab or a train station, but through a bustling ancient marketplace. Clay pots clink, sandals slap cobblestone, and the sun is high. No clocks here. But make no mistake, time is everywhere stitched into the fabric of the culture, the rituals, the seasons. Welcome to the world of calendars, humanity's most ambitious attempt to organize the chaos of time into something you can fold mark and complain about. You stop at a merchant stall selling dates and honey and overhear two men arguing. Is it the new moon yet? No, that's next week. They're not just being pedantic, they're negotiating reality. Because in ancient times, calendars were power. Control the calendar and you controlled planting, fasting, taxes, holy days, even wars. Some calendars followed the moon, others the sun. A few tried to follow both, which led to some real numerical gymnastics. The ancient Babylonians, for example, used a lunisolar system, inserting extra months occasionally to keep things aligned. Ancient Egypt, on the other hand, just said, let's stick with 365 days and ignore the lunar nonsense, which worked pretty well, except for that pesky quarter-day drift. And you, trying to schedule brunch, would not survive this system. Imagine your birthday changing every year. Imagine the new year creeping slowly towards summer, unless a priest declares it's time for a correction month. Oh, and don't forget the Romans once had a 10-month calendar. That's why September, meaning 7th, is our 9th month. Yeah. Oops. Then comes Julius Caesar, who decides enough is enough. With help from astronomers in Alexandria, he creates the Julian calendar. 365 days. One leap day every 4 years. Problem solved, right? Wrong. It drifts by about 11 minutes per year. Doesn't sound like much until over centuries the equinox shows up way too early. Easter starts sliding. Festivals go off script. Astronomers scream into their sundials. So in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII steps in with an even more refined system, the Gregorian calendar. He skips 10 days to fix the drift and changes the leap year rule. Every 4 years is a leap year unless it's divisible by 100, unless it's divisible by 400. You probably just glazed over, and so did half of Europe. Protestant countries refused to adopt it for hundreds of years out of spite. But eventually practicality won. Today, it's the global standard. But here's the weird part. Even though it's universal, cultures still carry their own versions. The Islamic calendar is lunar. The Jewish calendar combines solar and lunar cycles. The Chinese calendar overlays astrology and ancient cosmology. Ethiopia is currently in the year 2017. The Mayans had calendars for agriculture, astronomy, and arguably the end of the world. You begin to realize calendars aren't just timekeeping tools. They're cultural software. They encode identity, belief, power. The French Revolution even tried to reboot time with a new calendar, 10-day weeks, new month, names like Brumaire and Thermidor. It lasted about 12 years before people begged to go back to Sundays. Scientists still debate whether our obsession with rigid calendars helps or harms our natural rhythms. Some say the 7-day week has no biological basis, just ancient tradition. Others point to the Sabbath, the lunar cycle, or work-life balance, and say, maybe our ancestors knew something we don't. And what about sleep? Calendars. Carve out feast days, rest days, fasting periods. Some monastic schedules prescribed wake-ups at odd hours to pray according to specific feast dates. Even now, holidays' artificial constructs on the calendar dictate when we rest, when we travel, when we stress-eat pie. Here's a quirky tidbit in North Korea. The calendar doesn't start from the birth of Christ. It starts from the birth of Kim Il-sung, which means over there It's currently Juche 113. Yep. Time can be rebranded. You walk past a temple where priests are reading celestial charts, trying to determine the right day for a royal wedding. If they get it wrong, crops might fail. Or so people believe. Time isn't just science here, it's sacred and oddly fragile. You glance at a modern calendar on your phone. Tap to schedule a meeting. Tap to move a birthday party. Tap to cancel the dentist. You feel in control, but you also feel a little hollow, because for all our precision, our repeating weeks and numbered months, we've lost something. Time used to be felt, celebrated, feared, tied to the stars. Now it's an app with notifications, but maybe, just maybe, the calendar is still a kind of magic, a way to mark the seasons of your life, to say, this day matters, to remind you gently that even the most ordinary Thursday is resting atop thousands of years of human hope, mistake, and ritual. You turn the page. A new month begins, and somewhere inside, a small part of you exhales. You're lying on your back in the middle of your bedroom floor, staring at the ceiling like it might explain something. The lights are off. The clock on your nightstand glows faintly. It's 2:47 a.m. and you're still not asleep. Welcome to the end of the line, today's world, where time isn't sacred or seasonal or even particularly polite. It's sold, scheduled, subscribed to. You live in a world that doesn't just tell time, it monetizes it. Think about it. You don't own your minutes anymore. Your calendar is packed with back-to-back meetings. Your watch buzzes with reminders. Your phone chimes when it's time to stand. You sleep with one eye open and one hand on the snooze button. Even your moments of peace are interrupted by a calendar invite for something called sync alignment. Your day isn't measured in sunlight or hunger. It's measured in push notifications, to-do lists, and just 5 more minutes of screen time. And your body, it's still living in 40,000 BCE, wondering why the sun's gone down, but you're still basking in LED. It's no wonder sleep has become an endangered species. Studies show that the average person now sleeps nearly 2 hours less per night than people did a century ago. Not because the planet spins faster, but because we've filled every quiet crack in the day with glowing distraction. You're not dozing by the fire anymore, you're scrolling under the covers. Blue light hits your retina, suppresses melatonin, tricks your brain into thinking it's still daytime. Your body begs for rest, but your mind is checking one last message, one last video, one last dopamine drip. And when you finally do sleep, it's often shallow, fragmented, watched over by clocks that blink at you like disappointed parents. Scientists still debate whether technology has ruined sleep forever, or if we're just in a rough patch. There are promising developments: sleep trackers, circadian aligned lighting, mindfulness apps. But most of them require more screens. Here's a quirky tidbit in Japan. Some offices now encourage employees to take power naps in designated pods. But they also measure productivity gains from those naps. Even rest has KPIs. And yet, underneath all the buzz and beeping, there's a longing. A deep, ancient memory of slowness, of rhythm, of rest that isn't earned, optimized, or tracked. Just sleep. You remember the monks and their bells, the sundials and their shade, the dripping of a clepsydra in a temple courtyard. You remember the feeling of time belonging to nature not being pinned down by your calendar app. And it hits you somewhere along the way, we stopped measuring time in days and started measuring it in deficits. Not, how was your day? But did you finish everything? Not, did you rest well? But did you wake up early enough to get ahead? You probably wouldn't survive the old ways. No heating, no espresso, no noise-cancelling earbuds. But part of you wonders, would you sleep better? You close your eyes.
The clock ticks on, and you realize time, for all its inventions and abstractions, is still anchored in one simple truth. You are here, right now, awake but drifting, listening, feeling the gravity of the moment pull you gently towards stillness.
And that's where we'll leave you. Let's slow it all down now.
Let your breathing soften. No more clocks, no more buzzing screens. Just the quiet hum of your room, the soft weight of the blanket, the rhythm of your breath rising and falling like a tide you no longer need to control. You've wandered through thousands of years tonight, across deserts and empires, into labs and observatories, up to satellites, and down into atoms. You've heard the bells ring, the water drip, the gears turn, and the silence of the stars. And now none of that matters. Time has always been a human story. A way to mark change, to find rhythm in the chaos, to hold on to something as everything keeps moving. But here in this stillness, you don't need to hold anything. You don't need to be anywhere else. There is no schedule, no next thing, no final notification, just this moment. Your eyes can close now, if they haven't already. The thoughts that keep trickling in, let them come and let them drift. You've got nowhere to be but here. You've got nothing to prove, nothing to remember. You are not late. You are not early. You are simply resting. And whether time is real or not, whether it stretches or ticks, whether it began with a bang or a whisper, right now for you, it's doing the most important thing it ever could.
It's letting you fall asleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.